Hey, good afternoon. This is Mark Osmack. So this is our second iteration of going live on Facebook, and we're going to do this once a week, every Thursday. We're trying out at 1 o'clock to see if the participation rate can increase or viewership rate. We're going to try to answer. I'm going to try to answer questions. If you have some, you can type them in to the box that you see probably right now on Facebook and ask something, and I'll get to it. If I don't answer it, as I like to say, if I don't answer it, it's not because I'm trying to be cute or clever or tap dance around any situation or issue. It's because I failed to answer your question properly. And that's different than not agreeing with it, and that's okay too. But my job is to make sure that I answer every question fully. And if I don't know the answer, I will say what people are often too afraid to say, and that is I don't know. But I will find out that information. So I'd much rather tell you the truth than to be clever or cute and avoid the topics or issues at hand. So very quick background pertinent to this discussion on gun violence. Of course, this is being spurred on by the shootings yesterday where at least 17 people have been killed by one shooter. So I joined the Army at the age of 26. And went in as an officer after finishing basic training and commissioned through Officer Candidate School, OCS, and then went to airborne school and artillery school, so howitzers, mortars, that type of thing. The standard rifle that everyone is assigned or is trained on is an M4, which is a military version of the AR-15, which is, I know, has a lot of press right now and attention. So that's what I used. And so there are three settings. Just imagine, so right near the trigger well, you can swap it up with your thumb. It goes safe, and so that's when nothing will happen. Pull the trigger, nothing happens. Semi and then auto. So semi is just every time you squeeze the trigger, one bullet, one round will come out. And then if it's on automatic, which is most typically not used, certainly not training, that's when you'll get a burst of about 3 rounds after that. So that's what happens. So even that is not fully automatic by holding it down. So that's the background. I did deploy twice to Afghanistan. That was as an artillery officer the first time during 2010 to 11 during the surge in Afghanistan, and the second time with 101st Airborne 2013 to 14. So the first time I was there was in the south part. The second time I was in the little bit more north and eastern part of Afghanistan. So yesterday, horrible shooting and yet another one, and so I just want to point out a few facts. I want to get the numbers correct. So since January 1st of this year, there have been 18 school shootings, 29 mass shootings, and this is nationwide, 1,796 gun deaths, and 3,099 total injuries. And so that's since just January of this year. So one thing to make clear, doing nothing is not an option. We must do something. And who is we? We as the people of the United States collectively, and we as also the lawmakers that we have put either in our state capitals or in U.S. Congress. Whether you're a representative or a senator, this is on you. So we still don't know exactly what or the cause of motivation of yesterday, and in a way we'll figure that out maybe, but I think part of the truly concerning things is because I know a lot of people like to focus on mental health. I do understand that. So without going down the rabbit hole of the fact that we have cut a tremendous amount of our mental health services in 50 states and also from federal funding, but I think much more than that, I'm going to be very careful on how we address this, because I don't want to put people who do have mental health concerns into a negative bucket. First of all, what is mental health concern? Is that depression? Is that postpartum? Is that schizophrenia? I mean, so there's a whole spectrum here, and I think we may not like that answer. The other reason I don't like saying it's a solely mental health is because it assumes that people, or makes the assertion, or the assertion that someone with a mental health concern is more likely to be violent, which is not true. The most scary thing about this is that someone who does not have a mental health concern could do this, and that someone who could pass every single background check, who's never been to a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, and which are, none of those are bad things, would be more likely to commit a crime or a murder such as this, which isn't true. So it's putting, I think, the wrong people in the wrong focus. The truly scary thing about this is that it could be anybody. That's what's truly scary. So whenever we say someone is crazy, it alleviates us from any kind of introspection or comprehension of the issue. So if we say the shooter in Las Vegas was crazy, we can say, he's nuts, and we don't have to think about it anymore. But it also doesn't embolden us to do much about it. So one question is, what can we do? I think there are several things. So specifically to this, there is we can close the loophole that allows domestic abusers from carrying firearms. We can require universal background checks. Also require extensive training if you own a gun. Before you are legally allowed to drive a vehicle, you must get a driver's license. So if we require that for an automotive vehicle, we require it for something else that can truly do a lot of damage. And yes, there are other entities, other objects that can hurt and kill. Guns are one of them. So actually, the way that we go about registering cars, training on vehicles, we have driver's ed in class, we have driver's schools. We can do something similar to that. Without getting down a large legal loophole or large legal discussion, part of the challenge that we have, it says, as far as guns go, it is a well-regulated militia. Now we have that. We have 55 of them. We have the National Guard in 50 U.S. states and 5 U.S. territories. So that's there. If we require certain tests and registration to pass a driver's test, it only goes to reason that the same would be required for gun ownership. Another thing specifically to this is what we're calling the "it's on you." So if you have not to pick on any dog owners, but if you have a dog that mauls, maims, or kills another person, the dog owner is held responsible. The dog would be put down, but the dog owner is held responsible for that violent act. I don't know how we can stop all the gun deaths, but doing nothing is not an option. So one possibility that we can pursue is that if a gun is used in a crime, to trace that back to the owner. So we don't know enough. I don't know enough about the gun ownership situation with the guy who did the shooting in Florida. But when we find out, we can start to trace that back. And so that also is an impetus that if you do own a firearm, whether it's a rifle, an AR-15, a handgun, that it must be locked up. So obviously the government cannot, nor should it be everywhere, but responsibility is required. So specifically with the AR-15, I know that gets a lot of press. It's a civilian version, so that's the same gun that was used in Las Vegas. The biggest difference between that rifle and the one that the military personnel are issued is the automatic function. And so the big deal with bump stocks is that it simulates the automatic aspect of the rifle without actually having to have it on the gun itself, meaning it simulates the bumping, so the bump stock, to accelerate the speed at which rounds can be fired. So all you have to do is hold down the trigger, and in a way it confuses the rifle to think it's only firing one, but really it's firing multiple rounds. So what is the point of gun ownership? Well, this has to be evaluated. Does it have a place in schools? Absolutely not. I know a lot of people like to say that guns don't kill people, people kill people, and sometimes it's just with guns. I get it, but that is not going to work. And so the dangers that we're getting into is that this is now becoming the norm. And so with all the mass shootings that we've had since the start of the year and going back, I made a comment about this on 97.1 FM, which is a conservative radio station here in St. Louis. And unbeknownst to them, before the shooting, they said, how can you keep your ammunition? Is your ammunition safe? Is it safe to use? Is it safe from the government? Are you going to have access to it later? I don't really care. 2 hours later, that's when the shooting happened in Florida. So then I got a hashtag back from Mark Cox, MARCCOX, that liberalism is a mental disorder. Well, I disagree. I think doing nothing is a mental disorder. He made it very clear that now is not the time, and I'm trying to capitalize on this tragedy. I am not. But doing nothing is not an option. And I guess that's what he and other people who think like him are proposing. I do not own a firearm. That is a deliberate choice that I have, or that I've made. My dad does. He has 7. So we did not have them growing up, but that's the familiarity I have with them growing up, but also more importantly, I think in the military. So this March marked 10 years of being in the Army. So when I talk about guns, it's not coming from a liberal snowflake or ethereal or hypothetical position. It's coming from reality. There is no need for weapons like that. Part of this is culture. I can say this for me personally. I am no more and no less an American based upon my decision to own a gun. So I am no more and no less an American based upon my decision to join the military. And I know that some people might disagree with that, but I am fully an American, whether or not I own a gun or have one in my house or where I take it. The argument that we need more guns. I know Governor Huckabee, former Governor Huckabee, made a comment today that right now he's in Israel, and he says Israel has all but stamped out mass shootings because they have trained guards. I guess keyword there is trained, but trained guards throughout Israel and Jerusalem. Well, I don't want to live in a police state, and I don't think anyone else does either. So I don't think that's an option. The argument or the thought that more guns will stop gun violence is flawed. If that were the case, we would be the safest nation in the world. But also imagine that let's just hypothetically, let's say you're diagnosed or a person is diagnosed with cancer, and that the doctor or the oncologist recommends more cancer. Or that someone has debt, and a lawyer, a bankruptcy lawyer or a banker will say, well, what you need is more debt. That is the same flawed, really just errant thinking that we're applying to guns. In the meantime, how many more? And how many more are we going to wait for? How many more children? How many more people? How many more adults? How many more schools? You can't even take a water bottle on an airplane that's already been opened, but you can walk around many places, and a lot of Republican lawmakers won't allow people to walk around with their weapon, concealed and carry or not, openly. Look, I've been to Chipotle a bunch of times, and I never had to bring in a gun to get a Carnitas burrito. They're going to give it to you. So I think part of this is culture and addressing that, and that is not anything that we can legislate or that I can legislate, but starting that national discussion and saying that I'm very clearly not afraid of the NRA. I'm not afraid to take this on. What I would encourage people to do is ask. Ask candidates, where do you stand? I've checked. Most people do not have any stance on guns on their website. Does Rep. Wagner? Do other candidates? The answer is no. And all you got to do is do a Control F and type in gun, and there's nothing there. Because it's easier to say something, to talk in platitudes, to speak ethereally, or from some other level of people who have never held a firearm, never used one, never been on the receiving end of one, and not say anything essentially. So one great group that is doing a lot of tremendous work is Moms Demand Action. I would highly encourage everyone to join that or take a look into it. There are quite a few gun owners in this, so that their point, their goal, their aim is not to eradicate guns, but to find solutions that can help prevent these kind of loss of life that we're experiencing ever since Columbine and before that. So I'm not going to let any Republican or GOP member derail this conversation with saying, what about abortion? I get it. We can have that discussion. I will gladly have that discussion. This is about gun violence, nothing else. And if someone is going to another point, that means they have nothing else. So the whataboutism is not going to work. It's not going to fly with me. So we can talk about different issues on a separate time, and I'm more than willing to do that. But this is about guns. So on my website, markosmak.com, I have my positions on guns. I'm paraphrasing here that this nation struggles with gun violence on a level that no one else has. It is not normal. It is not acceptable. It is not the cost of doing business. And anybody who thinks that, I highly encourage them, and I would want to see it, them go to someone who's lost a loved one due to gun violence. Go down to Florida, go down to any of the next mass shooting, because there will be another one, and tell them your beliefs. Let them know why it's so good that you have to have unfettered access to firearms. Let them know. I want to see it, but I don't think anybody can do that. I think it's a lot easier to hashtag. I think it's a lot easier to talk. I think it's a lot easier to take pictures of guns, put it on Facebook, put it on Twitter, put an American flag behind it, and just be done with it and say, I'm an American. Well, like I said from the beginning, I'm an American, no more, no less, based upon my decision to own a firearm. So when I get to Congress, I am unafraid to tackle this issue. I will go at it boldly. I've said this before publicly and openly. I'm not afraid of the NRA. Period. I want them to come after me. I want them to be scared of me. I really do. The first thing that you do with a bully is you tell them I'm not afraid. After that, they get big, they puff up. But you say it again, you say it again, and you say it again, and then they start to shrink. We will reach a point in this nation where we become so fed up with gun violence, we will turn a corner. My biggest concern is I don't want to know, and I'm terrified at the thought of how many more children, how many more innocent people are going to be killed while we wait for someone to do something. In the meantime, I will do something. I'm running for Congress, and I hope to address those issues fearlessly and tirelessly when we get to Washington, D.C. If you have any questions, please send me an email. It's at mark, M-A-R-K, at markosmak.com, and that's M-A-R-K-O-S-M as in Mike, A-C-K.com. My phone number is area code 314-482-2911. And yes, it's actually me on the other side of that phone. So thank you all very much for your time. I wish it was under different circumstances, but we'll be doing this every single Thursday to talk about the toughest issues that others are afraid to talk about, go on the record about, and also put on their websites. Thanks so much.